This is the Accidental Safety Pro, brought to you by Vivid Learning Systems and the Health and Safety Institute, episode number 22. My name is Jill James, Vivid's Chief Safety Officer, and today I'm joined by Andrew, who is the Regional Safety Manager with JB Hunt. And Andrew is joining us today from Dallas, Texas. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks, Jill. Glad to be with you.
Well, Andrew, I think that transportation industry, I don't think we've had a guest in the transportation industry yet. So this is maybe a first for the podcast. So thanks for agreeing to talk with us.
Oh, of course, glad to. I've enjoyed listening and my interactions with Vivid. So being on the podcast is kind of the next cool step.
Great. So, Andrew, you didn't just land in the transportation industry. You found your way into safety and transportation through different means, starting out somewhere else. So can you sort of share with the audience your story of what your winding path is to safety?
Yeah, it definitely was a winding path. So growing up, I didn't really have a whole lot of safety in terms of a profession. Mm-hmm. Around me, my dad's an electrical engineer on the software and hardware side,
okay,
and an amateur kind of a handyman around the house. So we did a lot of, work and on wiring or installing a speaker system or things like that.
Did you have did you have a really cool stereo system in your house growing up?
Oh yeah, we installed, and actually one of the skills that I still have to this day is being able to drop and fish cabling to do wiring for a house or for surround sound or televisions. And,
that is a talent.
And so my dad taught me how to do that. Now the apartments I've lived at don't necessarily like the fact that I get into the walls and drop wires, but I like not having cables out on the floor. Yeah. But safety in that was always like, hey Andrew, we're going to work on this system without tripping the breaker because I don't want the AC or the lights off. Don't touch these wires, and don't touch anything metal. It's like, okay, all right, I will do those things.
Oh, man.
And you just never think about it when you're not involved in the industry
because you don't know.
Right, because you don't know, and my dad has made it however many years he had made it at that point, and hadn't had an accident or an incident, and was perfectly healthy, and so I trusted him and just kind of went along with it. And we never did anything really dangerous. Like the most dangerous thing we did was working on household 110 voltage wires without the breaker turned off, which can be dangerous.
Yeah,
but it wasn't. We weren't out there working on a table saw with the guard taken off or doing really, what I would call stupid things. We were just taking chances we probably shouldn't have.
It got lucky.
Yeah, and got lucky, right. And then in college, I was never in a safety role or anything really. Like the biggest safety thing we did was when I did food safety, because I worked a lot in restaurants and bars. But there wasn't a whole lot of safety. And graduating college, my thought was, I'm going to go into financial advising. I've got a degree in economics and political science, and I'm going to go help people make money. And for anyone who remembers what the market was like in the summer of 2010 when I got out of school, bad time.
Right.
Yeah, I picked the worst 4 months to try to make it in selling stocks and insurance. And so safety came along out of, failing to succeed in finance. Yeah. And I got an opportunity to go to a 5-star hotel brand in Austin, Texas, for what they called a risk management job. And what drew me to it wasn't even, I didn't even know safety was a part of it. I had done work in college as a door guy. I don't like the term bouncer, but yes, a bouncer at bars. And so I saw, security job. Well, it pays, which finance wasn't paying.
You needed it.
I need a job, and I can do this. I can chuck people out of bars if they're getting unruly. I'm sure I can keep 5-star hotel guests
in check
from getting unruly. Right.
Yeah.
And then I show up, and it's a lot more than that. It's security, but it's IT and it's safety. And so I'm thinking, oh, cool, I get to be involved in safety. And I thought at the time that this was like, oh wow, this is like real safety. And looking back, it was quite lax. But,
yeah, what did you think it was when you heard it was about safety? Kind of what was the first things that popped into your mind then?
Yeah, at the time I thought it was going to be a lot of like training, hands-on, working with the employees, maybe helping keep them safe, do some incident investigations. And it really wasn't. It was on the security side. We definitely did all of that, but on the safety side, if someone had an injury, we basically took a report. If we could give them first aid, we did, and then
Mm-hmm.
If it was beyond that, we made sure they got to wherever they needed to go for proper care, and then turned the file over to HR. And that was
Yeah, so the job was really more reactive than proactive. It wasn't a prevention
very much
work.
so. We didn't have anything that approximated a job safety analysis program or really robust training or safety training. We did some preventative in terms of drills, fire drills, testing our communication and our
Sure.
protocols.
Life safety
Right.
stuff. Mm-hmm.
The risk team, we all got first aid and CPR trained, which was good. If fortunately I didn't have to use that training much. A little bit of applying a
Mm-hmm.
bandage or helping someone with a sprained wrist or something. But fortunately, no CPR or anything major.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it just wasn't as you're right. It wasn't proactive. And then the name OSHA would have been just a complete foreign language to anyone at the hotel. Like I never heard OSHA
Right.
once the entire time I was there. And
Yeah.
so get
And it's not that the hospitality industry is devoid of safety, because there's definitely
oh
risks
yeah,
there.
for sure. And there were things we tried to do the best we could.
Mm-hmm.
Keep facilities clean. Housekeeping was a big thing on the safety side of, hey, make sure that
Sure.
if you're in the kitchen, make sure that all this stuff is out of the way so that the people walking back and forth with hot food don't spill it all over themselves or get burned, things like
Right.
that. But it's not as robust as it definitely should be for the risks. I mean, you
Yeah.
talk about a department like the housekeeping department and their
Mm-hmm.
exposure to something like bloodborne pathogens and
Mm-hmm.
the complete absence, at least that I experienced, of a BBP training
Mm-hmm.
program. Or I didn't even know at the
Mm-hmm.
time that the hepatitis B vaccine was mandated to be made available.
Right.
I didn't even know there was a vaccine for hepatitis B at the time because I never had any reason to
Yeah,
know.
you had a degree in
Right.
economics and political science. This was not your
No, it
wheelhouse.
wasn't. But I will say I did learn a lot of how to interact with people and how to get people together. We struggled with our
Yeah.
injury frequency at that property. We could never get more than
Yeah.
about 20 or 25 days, and so I got to develop some of my motivational skills and my incentivizing skills and some of the getting
Mm.
people to pull together and pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
But hamstrung by having a safety team, as we could call ourselves, that were really devoid of any real good safety education and standards and practices.
Or resources, I suppose,
Yeah,
as
for
well.
sure.
I mean, yeah, and if when you talk about the hospitality industry and housekeeping department, and you already mentioned bloodborne pathogens, I think about ergonomics, and the ergonomic stresses of the repetitive
Very much
work
so.
of cleaning the rooms, and the repetitive stress involved in the laundry facility, and the things that happen on a loading
Oh
dock.
yeah.
If you have forklifts moving and you're moving and lifting equipment, and the kitchen, you already mentioned that. There's certainly things that happen in that industry. My one of my very first jobs, first thing I did to earn a paycheck outside of babysitting when I was a teenager, was in housekeeping at one of those drive-up
Okay.
motels. And I was the summer help, and the ladies that usually did the cleaning full time took one look at me that summer and said, "You get the bathrooms all summer,"
Oh,
so that they could skip it. And this wasn't I didn't know what OSHA was either, but again, another industry that devoid of safety. So there wasn't any training on the chemicals that I was using with my bare hands, and I wasn't offered any personal protective equipment, and there was no talk of infectious agents or bloodborne pathogens. And hopefully that tide is changing for the hospitality industry. It'd be interesting to talk with a safety professional in that industry and get a take on what's a modern practice now.
yeah. And I would agree. I would hope it's changed. I would hope that over the years, as OSHA has stepped up enforcement of a lot of industries, that maybe they've hit the hospitality industry and people realize that it's something to take seriously.
Yeah, yeah. So when you were doing that job, was a kind of a light bulb going on for you that you thought, this safety thing is kind of something I
A little
like?
bit, yeah. It was definitely something I thought, I don't mind what I'm doing right now. which is,
Mm-hmm.
for the job that it was probably as good as it was going to get. I was working third shift, so I was working I was
Hard.
working a
Mm-hmm.
11 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
Shift, dealing mostly with security, but the safety side of it,
Mm-hmm.
I got to deal with the overnight crew, and we were a very limited crew, and so we formed a really good bond, and so I was actually able to get people to pay attention to what they were doing and to be a little bit safer than they had been.
Yeah. How did you do that?
I've always been a connector of sorts, being able to connect with people and get people to connect, and I'm really good at just getting people to agree to be a team. And that's all I really
Mm-hmm.
did was, hey guys, if you get hurt, we have to bring someone from day shift to night shift. They don't understand our night shift culture. They
Mm.
don't understand how night shift
Mm-hmm.
works. They don't understand the dynamic,
Mm-hmm.
and they're probably not going to be as willing to
Mm-hmm.
go above and beyond to help each other, because they're used to the day shift
Mm-hmm.
where you stay in your lane.
Yeah.
As an
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
on the night
Yeah.
shift when I was a security officer most of the time. That's kind of what my main job was. But there were times where room service would be in over their heads, and there was only one person on staff. And at one point, the lady who was working room service, I saw her in the hallway, and she tripped and spilled a pitcher of water all over her uniform and herself, and
Oh.
had to go make deliveries. And I was like, okay, just refill the pitcher of water, give me the tray and what room we're going to. It won't be the world's best delivery service, but I'll get the food there, and you can go, change
Uh-huh.
uniforms or whatever. And so we would help each other like that. We would, things that were in our
Yeah.
wheelhouse, and we were a really cohesive team. And so we knew, hey, if I do
Mm-hmm.
something stupid and get hurt and I'm out of work, it's going to hurt everyone else on the night shift. Everyone,
Yeah. It'll
it
upset the
will, it
rhythm.
will. And so we
Mm-hmm.
kind of just had this communal look. I'm not going to hurt you by hurting myself. I'm not going to let you down by
Mm.
not being here.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of as far as I got with that team. But it
Mm-hmm.
was definitely successful. We didn't have
Yeah.
minimal, if any, frequency out of the overnight employees. Generally, it was daytime stuff that would
Yeah.
cause injuries.
Huh. What a great
Yeah.
start. What a great start. So how long were you there and what happened
So I was
next?
there for almost 2 years, year and a half, almost 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I got tired of night shift and didn't really have any upward mobility at the hotel, and I
Mm-hmm.
was in a department that didn't tend to pull from the college educated and the upward mobile. It was kind of a, hey, you come here, you do your thing, and you just stay in this lane. And that's not what I
Mm-hmm.
wanted. My wife and
Yeah.
I had gotten married while I was working for the hotel, and she was working in the optometric industry,
Mm-hmm.
and as an optician, and she really loved her career, and that was great. But I wanted more for what I was doing, and so a college friend of mine was working for JB Hunt, and I'd applied a couple of times, just
Mm-hmm.
over the 2 years, I think at that point, since I graduated, and it hadn't really gone anywhere. And he finally said,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I'll go talk to our HR rep, send me your resume, put in an application, and he said, I can only promise that I'll ask her to give you a call and to start the conversation. It's on you from there, and that's all I really needed.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
take
all
it
I
all.
wanted was a foot in
Mm-hmm.
the door,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
that led to me getting an offer to join them as a manager trainee in the operations side. Which I wanted
Oh.
to. Safety was fun, and safety was something I enjoyed, but I was really interested in I've got to make a career change, and I
Yeah.
figured, hey, they hire into this manager trainee role. It's in operations. I'm gonna go be an operator. And
Yeah.
what I found out very quickly, actually, day one of our orientation. So I pack up my wife and our one cat at the time, and we drive to Dallas from Austin, unload, and I show up
Uh-huh.
for work. And the first thing I do day one is I get to go sit through driver safety orientation. And I
Okay.
sat through 2 days of driver orientation with the other new manager that was hired the same week, and with all of the drivers that were joining the company through Dallas. And then on
Mm-hmm.
day two, they tell me, okay, tomorrow morning, be prepared for this thing called Smith System. And I'm thinking, okay, what's Smith System?
What's
And
that?
uh,
Mm-hmm.
show up the next morning, and it's advanced defensive driving. And they teach us all a class on advanced defensive driving and then put us in cars and make us go out and do these very specific advanced defensive driving technique drives, and trained us all in Smith's system. And then the drivers went off and did things that weren't really relevant for the managers, and they put us through some maintenance, what they call maintenance 101, where we learned about how the trucks have their oil changed and what the maintenance shop runs like. And then the final day, they put us with an area risk manager, and it's a full day of introduction to safety culture, the JB Hunt way. And we watched training videos. There was a PowerPoint and discussions, and there were a couple of videos about, hey, these were some major events, and this is what we learned from them. Really impressing the importance of culture and the importance of, hey, ops folks, new ops managers and managers in training. It's not just that you get to push a button and dispatch a driver. There are real consequences to having an 80,000
the gravity of
an 80,000 pound vehicle rolling down the highway. And this light bulb went off like, oh, this is a company that actually cares about safety. They care about their people and about doing things the right way. And so in addition to doing the training, I would also review what we called safety events. We have telematics on our trucks, and if a driver hit the brakes too hard or the roll stability in the truck's activated, we would know about it, and we'd sit down and have a discussion and try to come up with how to change that behavior. Was it something the driver was doing wrong? Was it something the driver didn't know? Was it something the driver just needed an attitude adjustment or something of that nature, and try to keep the drivers safe? And it really opened up this whole new idea of, okay, I'm not an operator. I'm a safety guy who has operations responsibilities, because that's really how we feel, is that safety is owned by the operations. And to give kind of a picture, now in my current role, I've got 7 risk managers that work for me, and we have almost 2,000 drivers across 4 states at over 100 different what we call accounts, fleet locations. The safety manager can't do it all. And I learned very quickly that because the safety manager can't do it all, and really shouldn't, the operators had to own it. And so, I didn't have a safety title, but for my first 4 years, I was very embedded in the safety and the culture of the individual account locations that I worked at. And I worked at a couple of different ones. I went from the pallet customer that we had to a water distributor to a restaurant that we used to run for, or we still do. We still do run for them. And so I kept promoting up, and in about 2015, so I joined JB Hunt in very early 2012, and in the middle of 2015, they opened up a new area risk manager role in Dallas. At the time, there were only 4 in the region. We were a smaller region. Well, they opened up a 5th position, and I put my name in the hat because I really enjoyed working with my ARM. My ARMs had been mentors to me, and since they had been good mentors, and I kind of liked what I heard about the job. You get to travel, you get to see different accounts, you get to be deeply involved in starting up new operations and the planning. I thought I wanted to go at it, and so I was fortunate enough to get the job, and
yay, congratulations!
Yeah, and now I had a real safety role. I was focused as a safety person, and that was a whole different experience. The safety that I knew as an operator was very tactical and very, okay, if A happens, you need to figure out if it was root cause B, and then you're going to take action C. And it was very procedural, which is what it needed to be for the,
of course,
for the operators in the field. But as an area risk manager, I got a whole bunch of extensive training. There were several weeks of attend this training course. One of them is, we go up to Oklahoma City and attend the DOT's Transportation Safety Institute. They have what they call Intro to the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations, which is a week solid of going through the Code of Federal Regulations that applies to trucking and transportation, and really getting expertise in how those regulations work and how to interact with them.
Sure. And I'm gonna say that sounds fun, and anyone who's not a safety professional listening to this would be like, what?
Yeah.
But really, I mean, who gets to have that kind of dedicated training? When I was with OSHA and I got to go to the OSHA Training Institute, handfuls of times for like a week of training. I mean, it's intense, but gosh, you learn so much. So what an awesome opportunity.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it was great. Now, very dry because for
Of
anyone
course, it's
who's
regulatory.
right, anyone who's read the CFR knows
Yeah.
that it's the cure for insomnia, but very informative.
Right.
They brought in enforcement officers to teach certain sections, particularly on the maintenance side. They brought in a safety director from an oil field company who actually at one time helped develop the TSI program. And he talked about logging and regulation, and we spent half a day on a very particular part of the logging regulation that I'd say 90% of people mess up if they're not really careful. It's what's called the split sleeper berth provision, and it allows the driver to not take a full break, but to split their break over a couple of different periods. And it's a very easy one to find yourself afoul of the regulations. And so we spent, they knew this, obviously, and they said, you guys are going to learn this backwards and forwards so that you are experts. And got to do that, got to go become a Smith System instructor. So,
Oh, cool.
yeah, so 4 years on from joining JB Hunt and taking my first Smith System class and then doing the every 3-year recert that we do. I got to go to their Smith Systems headquarters in Arlington, Texas, just down the street, and become an instructor, which is a week of advanced defensive driving. And more than just that, they taught us a lot of adult education, how to teach adults.
How to teach adults,
yeah,
sure.
which is very different than teaching children, very different
Certainly is.
than teaching college students. It's a unique perspective. And then I got to be an advanced defensive driving instructor, and had to go through to where I could do this course without notes, basically, because once you're in the vehicle, it's all about what's going on, and you've got to, even as an instructor, you've got to be thinking 6 or 7 steps ahead of what's going on while still engaging everyone. And it was a great experience. And and all of that learning got me ready to then start learning how to actually be a safety guy in the real world. Because
So you were getting your baseline at this point now.
yeah, and that took a couple months of getting the baseline. And at this time, while I'm doing the baseline training, I'm also working as a safety professional and working with my accounts. And I got thrown immediately into starting up new business within the first couple of weeks of getting the job. And so I'm on the fly developing JSAs and really understanding the back end of, okay, so we have this task. Now, how do we figure out how to do it safely, and how do we figure out how to do it in the most compliant manner while also making it easy to understand and easy to follow?
Right. Some of the best ways to learn is like you're saying, doing it on the fly when it's urgent.
Yes.
And specific, and you have real lives on the line, and you have an end goal.
Yeah. It was the first time in my life doing this. We started up a customer that required the use of Moffats, which are the mounted forklifts. A lot of people have seen them. They just don't know what they are. They're the forklifts that look like they're hanging off the back of a flatbed or a delivery truck. Yeah. Moffat's the most common brand. And we needed to be able to teach this. Well, I had never even seen one up close, let alone operated one. And so I had to ship myself down to one of our operations in San Antonio that had an expert trainer there. And he put me through all of the training and the regulatory things I had to know, how to do the inspection. And then I had to do some training with him, and I got my I was internally certified to be an operator and a trainer to then come back up and train the new drivers at this new operation. And so, I'm going through all the training with them thinking, okay, like I know what I'm doing, but this guy just told me he's run this equipment before at another company for a couple of years, and here I am. I just learned about it last week, and now I'm the guy who has to do the class.
How green that feels,
oh,
right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But it started a habit of mine where I have become the specialized equipment kind of guy in our region, the guru, for lack of a better words. When I was an area risk manager, I would
Mm-hmm.
always leap at the opportunity. Hey, we got some new specialized. I want to learn it. And then when we get
Uh-huh.
together as a team for our next quarterly meeting, I want to do the specialized training. And my
Mm-hmm.
boss had to pull back on the reins a little bit and say, okay, you can't always be the one to teach, but I'm gonna
You
let
loved it.
yes, but I'm gonna
Yeah.
let you be my
Uh-huh.
specialized equipment guy. And I learned everything that I
Oh, that's
could.
so fun.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and so
that's so fun.
and so the
So,
go ahead.
mhm. Well, I was just thinking about, when what your evolution has been like from the hospitality industry, which was lack, and then you come to your first days at JB Hunt, where you're hearing the importance that they place on safety.
Hmm.
You go through this pretty massive sounding orientation, which is fantastic, where you're really getting as a new operations person. Um, I don't, the right word might not be indoctrinated, but you're really learning like what the expectation is for safety, for the culture and the organization. And when you were taking that in, I'm curious if you can kind of pull yourself back to that time. Your voice started to get excited. You were excited and animated at that time. Did you think, oh man, what a relief I landed in the right place, though it might not have been exactly the right fit for the job at that time?
Yeah, I definitely thought I landed in the right place. And
Mm-hmm.
the fact that they cared that much about the line employees, the drivers, and they cared
Yeah.
enough about the managers to give us the training to
Mm-hmm.
understand the expectations. It really made it feel like a family, and that's the atmosphere that I've always had
Yeah.
working for JB Hunt. Is we may be this very large Fortune 500 transportation company, but it feels very familial.
Yeah.
I have a good relationship with all of my employees. I used to say I knew everyone in the region, and we've just grown so much that I tell people, I'm naturally not good with names and
Mm-hmm.
remembering people, but
Mm-hmm.
if I see you enough and I shake your hand and we talk, I'll remember you eventually. And I
Mm-hmm.
try to remember
Mm-hmm.
as many as I can. But
Mm-hmm.
when you've grown like we've grown
Mm.
over the last
Yeah.
7 years, it's hard to know everyone. But
Yeah.
I try. I still try.
Right, right, right.
Um,
Yeah, and then when you landed in the job in 2015 as the risk manager role, did you feel like you came home like, "Oh, this is what I've been preparing for all these
Yes,
years?"
I did. I really did feel
Mhm.
like it was a homecoming of sorts. Like
Yeah.
I didn't know it was home. I didn't know it was what I was looking for. But when I got into it, I was like, yes, this is what I enjoy doing because
Yeah.
it's a very problem solving application. So like I said,
Mhm.
the operators own the tactics and own the ground level of safety.
Right.
But as a area risk manager, it was my job to help with the strategy and to help them understand where they needed to go, understand, hey, you're having this issue, so this is how we strategically
Yeah.
plan around it and train around
Mhm.
it. And then a lot of
Mhm.
special projects, the startups, the specialized equipment training, when customers come along and say, hey, we've got this brand new thing we need you to do for us. Can you make it happen? And they look to the safety guy and go, okay, safety guy, how do we do this safely? Because none of us have
Uh-huh.
ever seen it before. And
Right,
and
right.
getting to be that relied on resource really was what I loved about the role, was that I
Right.
became this guy that my ops leadership, our region ops managers, would call on. I was assigned to two of them, and when they had big deal projects, they'd call on me. So
Hmm.
we've got a group of customers uh, in the oil field, in the oil and gas industry, and so when I got into this role, I had to go become a trainer for our mobile cranes,
Mhm.
which we use, and then I had to go take SafeLand, which is the training orientation that allows you to go onto a rig site. And if you don't have this card, they literally tell you, well, that's nice, but sit on the other side of the street. You're not allowed here.
Mhm.
And with that, then I had to do hydrogen sulfide training as an instructor for
Mm.
both
Mhm.
SafeLand and hydrogen sulfide safety training, and had to be up to date on all of that. And it allowed me a lot of cool experiences. One of which was kind of really building our company's hydrogen sulfide protocols and response
Mhm. Mhm.
plan, because we had just gotten into this industry. And then I come along and I get my training, and I realize, hey guys, let's put this all together.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, and the coolest thing I got to develop was our customer came to us and said, okay, you normally haul these oversized size tanks. That's nice. We would like you to haul the largest tank we make, which is a tank that's uh, almost 22 feet across widthwise
Whoa.
and is oversize in every dimension. It is the supreme of oversize that we do. Now, it's not the biggest thing that's ever moved down the highway, but for JB Hunt, it was the biggest thing we'd ever carried at the time. And so I got to develop, okay, how are we going to secure this load properly? And not just properly, how are we going to do it in a way that doesn't damage the product? Because the customer, what had happened, they had a specialized carrier for these who got in a lot of trouble for damaging the product because of how they secured it using the chains. And so I had to develop a method that would secure the product, meet all of the regulations for load securement, but wouldn't mark up the paint and wouldn't damage the flanges and anything else. And then how are we going to handle this going down the road?
Right.
And that was a project.
I mean, and these are,
Go ahead.
yeah, these are all the things that, people don't think about. Well, I mean, I do because I'm a nerd that way, and many of us listening to this do because we're nerds in that way. But when I'm going down the highway and I'm coming up behind or next to a semi that's hauling a load that's secured, I'm looking at that load and how it's secured. I'm looking at its straps. I'm looking at its chains. And my naked eye, of course, can't see whether it's right or wrong because I haven't had the specialized training that you have. But I always think about, A, did the person that secured that have proper training? And B, what a big responsibility that is.
Oh, yeah.
For not only the product, like you're saying, and of course the safety of your employees who are hauling it, but everybody else on the roadway. I mean, it's a big deal. And so, well, thanks for doing that training with everyone.
Well, you're welcome.
And becoming a specialist in that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, of course. Well, and you said people don't really think about it, and you're right. I know I didn't think about it until I got into the role. Like I never considered what it took to secure a product on a flatbed or have equipment in the right condition. And now, if my wife is driving and we're on the road and we pass an 18-wheeler, I'm, almost leaning out the window and watching the equipment and taking notes. And is that strap the right way around? And did it go through the rub rail the right way? And, oh, hey, look at those chains. And my wife will just put the pedal down and get past the truck, so I'll stop talking about it. But
this sounds very familiar to my life when I'm naming types of cranes on the horizon or types of scaffolds. And my son will say to me, Mom, please.
Yes.
Please.
Yep.
But your eyes can't help it. Once you see these things, you can't help it.
Yeah, no, safety is not a job that you can turn off. I don't get to clock out at the end of the day. I just am a safety guy. So, but it was that role for the time that I was in it was one of the most rewarding things I think I've done so far in my career because I got to develop these relationships and then see the results. I would have drivers that would come up to me and say, hey, thank you for showing us this. Or I have a driver call me and say, hey, Andrew, I've got this problem. I don't know how to solve it. And neither does my manager because we've never come across this, but I need an answer. What do I do? And being that resource and knowing that I've done a good enough job that the people that I work with trust me was really confidence inspiring. And it told me I'm doing the right thing. And then as careers will do, I had an opportunity come up to me. I'd actually pushed this opportunity away a couple of times internally. They had not offered me this role so much as they had said, hey, would you consider this role? And I'd said, well, no, it's permanently based in West Texas. And at this time I'm still based in Dallas. And I don't want to go out there and I have no problem traveling and visiting, but I don't want to live out there. And they came back around and our director of operations and one of the regional ops managers, they kind of sat me down and said, hey, we're going to ask, but we really need you to do this. And so I had the opportunity to go move back into operations and head up one of our accounts out there delivering to a retail customer. And we kind of went through a management transition for various reasons. The management team, by the time I got there as the general manager, was all new. We changed that over, and there was a need for some kind of grounding and reestablishing of all the operational and safety cultures. And so I went back into an ops role.
Evolution of companies. That happens everywhere.
It does. And so I went back into an ops role, but as a former area risk manager, I went in knowing not only the importance of a safety culture that JB Hunt develops in all of its employees, but hey, I've actually been on the other side of the line on the safety side, and so I'm going to start making decisions as an operator like I'm still a risk manager.
Yeah.
and I'm going to keep my risk manager from having to bother us. Not bother us, but having to, well, bother us one, but not having to worry about us. I actually told the
Right.
guy and that took over my territory when I left to take this operations role. I said, hey, you don't worry about me and this account. If you see that
Mm-hmm.
I'm messing up, call me out on it, please.
Mm-hmm.
It's still your job, but I'm going to take care of this like I'm still an area risk manager and
Yeah.
keep it off of your plate.
Uh-huh.
And with varying degrees of success, we were able to do that for the time that I was out there. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was going to be out there for quite a while. I was prepared for that.
Mm-hmm.
And in late 2017, so I moved out there in right around Thanksgiving of 2016, and in late 2017, the gentleman that had been my boss when I was an area risk manager, he got promoted. So
Mm-hmm.
he went from the regional safety manager for our region and actually moved to another division as their safety director. And
Mm-hmm.
once again, region leadership came to me and said, "Hey, Andrew, would you come back to safety and be our regional safety manager?" And so
Mm-hmm.
I was fortunate enough to, I interviewed, and there were a couple of us that really wanted the role, and
Yeah.
we're kind of, the guys that it's going to be one of you. And I was fortunate enough to get it, and I got to come back and now lead the team that I had been a part of. And so I've been in that role now since late 2017, in
Mm.
charge of the risk management team for
Yeah.
our little 4-state region.
Right. And so did that feel like a big yes when that opportunity came your
It
way? Like, oh yes.
it did. In fact, I had because I still came to Dallas a lot, to
Mm-hmm.
visit friends, and one of the friends was at the time the current regional safety manager, and we were sitting on his back porch, after dinner, just catching
Like you
up.
do
And
in Texas.
yeah, it's a very Texas thing to do. You have
Mm-hmm.
dinner, and then you go sit on the back porch because in the evenings it's quite
It's
pleasant. Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah.
And he was talking about, well, something may come along in my career, and I just offhandedly said, oh, well, if you ever up and move and vacate this role, I know what I'm going to put in and apply for. And he just
Mm-hmm.
kind of said, oh, well, that's good to know. And then magically, a couple weeks later, he's promoted, and they're coming around to me going, hey, would you like to interview and be a part of this? And
Nice.
so I wanted to come back.
Sure.
And
You had made a home there.
yeah, and so I came back, and
Mm-hmm.
I've been in this role, and it's we've had we've had a lot of change on the risk management team, and I've got to do a lot of training with my area risk managers and bring new guys on and keep the culture going. And
Mm-hmm.
I still hold true to how my previous regional safety manager and the guy before him ran safety, but I do it in my own way. And it's really, we've continued to push as we've grown and had additional customers added, that
Yeah.
it's got to be a cultural thing for us. And so I really tell my guys when they come on board that we are sort of the vanguard of the culture. We
Yeah.
we we
That's so true. I mean,
yes,
that's a beautiful way to say it.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and it's our job to teach the culture, to preach the culture, to
Mm-hmm.
live the culture, and to make sure it's properly owned by the
Mm-hmm.
operators.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not our job to micromanage. It's not our job, unless we absolutely have to be what I call a compliance cop. I think we all know the
Right.
safety guy that is a compliance cop and
Yeah. None
walks
of
ar-
us wants that job.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
walks around thumping the regulation book, and
Uh-huh.
and it's not, it doesn't endear you to your people, and it
Right.
definitely doesn't make you effective.
Yeah.
Everyone knows the regs. All of my operators know when their driver has to shut down. The thing a risk
Mm-hmm.
manager has to do is make sure that the managers are teaching the drivers and holding the drivers accountable.
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
when we
Mm-hmm.
successfully do that, we're really successful, as a region. And
Mm-hmm.
when we stop holding people accountable and we get a little bit lax, then trouble creeps in.
Right, right. So, Andrew, I'm curious to know, with the now years of experience that you've had and the training that's kind of behind you, all of your career, starting back in hospitality to today, what would you say are the three biggest things that you've learned?
Yeah. So the three biggest things I've learned, first is expertise. I always tell people that join my team, look, you're never going to be an expert the first time around, but you must become an expert at the things you are going to be expecting of your people. And so, particularly, and
Mm.
I'll take specialized equipment,
Mm-hmm.
things like forklifts, power pallet jacks, the Moffats, flatbeds, even our yard tractors. I myself am trained and certified on all of them and have operated all of them at one point or another in my career with JB Hunt. And I expect all of my risk managers to do the same. In fact, just recently, because we had a whole bunch of new risk managers join the team as people have gotten promoted from the team and have moved on to other roles, we did our yard tractor certification. And I got to take several guys who had never even hauled a trailer behind a pickup truck and teach them how to move 53-foot dry vans around a yard and do backing maneuvers. And I told them, hey, I'm going to get you started, but you have to become the expert. I told them, go to your accounts that have this equipment, wait for the down hour or the down 30 minutes and go get in the yard tractor. Make sure the operators know what you're doing, but go get in the yard tractor and practice. Because when next year comes around and you have to do the recertifications for all of your yard drivers, you need to be comfortable not only doing it, but teaching it. And the only way you can teach it is by knowing how to do it.
Right. And it buys you street cred with the people who are expected to do that work.
It does. You know, I've got a funny story on street cred.
Okay.
This was back when I was an area risk manager in Oklahoma City. We had a group of accounts, and we had some newer drivers struggling with their what we call close quarters maneuvering, generally backing, but really anything you do on a lot or in a dock situation. And so I went up and I set up this training course. It's an old test, really, that drivers used to be given. It's called a serpentine. You basically have to move the truck and the trailer like a snake through a course and then park it in a spot. And it's set up very tight on purpose. And, you know, so anytime I do trainings like that, I've got a whistle that I hold on to, and I tell the drivers, if you hear the whistle stop, that means you have, quote, had a collision, and we're going to look at where you're at and review. And so I spent hours out there just blowing the whistle constantly because the drivers couldn't get it. And one of them finally hops out of the cab and goes, okay, safety man, this isn't possible. You do it if you're so good. And so, okay, I get the truck set up, and it's a sleeper truck with a 53-foot trailer. So it's about 75 to 80 feet long. And I get in and I get it in gear, and I go back through the course and get it back into the spot at the end of the course where it's supposed to be. And I get out and I walk over and I call the drivers together, and I pull out my wallet and I pull out my driver's license, and I say, I'd like you guys to tell me what's special about my driver's license compared to yours. And they all look at it, and then one of them kind of hangs his head and goes, you don't even have a CDL. And I said, yes, that's the point. I don't have a CDL, and I'm not a driver. The first thing I tell them is I'm not a driver. I'm a safety manager. I'm a risk manager. But I said, I don't have a CDL, and I just took that truck through the course and put it into the spot. It's not impossible. Who thinks they can do it? And one by one, they lined up and walked up to the truck, got in the cab, and in one shot put it all the way through the course, each one of them, one right after the other. And I didn't have to touch my whistle again the rest of the day.
You mentored your way through that one, or there was competition.
Yeah, well, and you know, so I got to see. I was thinking about telling this story if it came up. I got to see one of the drivers who was in that course this past week. I was back up in Oklahoma City, and I saw him, and I shook his hand, and he's like, you know, it's been a while, but why do I remember you? And I said, well, do you remember the close quarters course? And he goes, oh yeah, that's where I've seen you before, because it's been a couple of years since I've been up in Oklahoma City as a risk manager. And we got to laughing and talking about it, and he, you know, and it's that thing that, you know, the guys remember. They go, yeah, there was that risk manager, didn't even have a CDL and could do this course. And
that safety guy.
Yeah, that safety guy. And so, yeah, so street cred is incredibly important. After expertise, the next big thing is culture. And it's really, this is the biggest thing I've learned. And JB Hunt having a very strong and well-developed, mature safety culture kind of helped me learn this. But safety is everyone's job. And that's not just a cliche that we say in the safety industry to make ourselves feel better about the fact that we're out there fighting this battle against the world, but it really is. It has to be the line supervisors, the line employees, the next level managers, the directors, all the way up to the chief executive officer of the company. They've got to believe in it. If they don't believe in it, it's going to break down. And it's the job of the safety manager then is to be, like I said, is to be the vanguard of the culture and to grow that culture. You know, you can't encourage safety culture if you yourself aren't really good at believing in it and abiding by it. And it can't be a do as I say, not as I do. You know, you have to be that example. And so I really work with my
Yeah.
guys on presentation, on um, walking the walk as well as talking it. Talking it, and
Mm-hmm.
so that means
Mm-hmm.
things like, we're Smith System instructors and we're a Smith System driving company. Well, that means, okay, guys, back upon arrival, park your car backwards in the spot when you get there, because that's what we expect our people to
Mm-hmm.
do. And you can't be this teacher and this leader if you yourself don't believe in it and don't act on it. And then
Mm-hmm.
making sure that the culture doesn't lose focus of what's really important. So uh, it, particularly with how we handle safety events, there's the coaching, the training, the safety side, but there has to be behavior modification as well. We have to change behaviors, and that
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately means sometimes discipline. And through my training,
Yep.
there's always this real sharp divide between safety and discipline, and review and discipline. And there's a lot of very good instruction that says the point of doing reviews and the point of doing investigations is not to discipline employees. It's to figure out root causes and learnings and make sure it doesn't happen again. And that is 100% true.
Mm-hmm.
However,
Mm-hmm.
there are those that
Mm-hmm.
don't take it the next step, that goes, okay, and once you've done that, if an employee's behavior needs modifying, how do you modify it? And how do you modify it in a way that's going to be effective and fair? And as an area risk manager, and now as the regional safety manager, we have to manage both sides. The culture can't just be a nice
Yes,
thing to talk
absolutely.
about. It also has to be something with, some real consequence to give it some weight. And so
Mm-hmm.
we try to avoid,
Mm-hmm.
bringing down a hammer and disciplining when we don't need to. But unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
there are some people whose behavior you have to modify, and they only modify their behavior a certain way, is when you make it uncomfortable for them not to modify their behavior. And so,
Right. I mean, it's the genius of knowing how adults,
yeah,
will react to things.
100%.
Right. Yeah. I had a mentor to me who was not a safety person, but really deeply mentored lots of aspects of my career, who's a industrial psychologist. And we were doing some training around safety together, and then he was teaching me more than I was doing anything with him, frankly, because he was so genius. And he had this thing that he taught me: stop, start, continue, when you're having conversations with people that might be difficult. And framing it, and you could think about this with like kids, even how you want to change a behavior. Stop, I need you to stop XYZ
Mm-hmm.
thing. I need you to start doing blah 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 blah, or this way, and I need you to continue, really highlighting the things that are
Right.
done well. And it's a way to present information to people that acknowledges what's right, but clearly using the word stop. Like, this is the part
Yeah.
that's
No,
not true.
and that's an incredible way to think
Yeah.
about the conversation, because it really is. If I'm having that conversation with a driver, I recognize you do, a lot of things very well. Driver, I
Mm-hmm.
recognize that, you've got experience in the truck that I will never have, and you've got a good record.
Mm.
But I need you to
Yeah.
stop doing this one thing. And then instead, I need you to do it this way, so that you can continue doing
Yeah.
all the good things that you do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a
Mm-hmm.
big part
Mm-hmm.
of where I see my team's role now, and my role is to be the mentor to the operators who have to have those, tough discussions on a daily basis, and to teach them about,
Right.
hey, this is how you need to address this. And if you need me to sit in with you, or sometimes I have to sit in with you, this is how I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
approach it, so that they can learn as well. Because the best thing
Mm-hmm.
as a risk manager is that your people manage safety, and you get to be the one who has the oversight, and then gets to work on the special projects and the really challenging things.
Yeah.
If you're stuck in the weeds managing the day-to-day tactics of safety, when now every industry is different, but in my industry, and how we work, if my guys were doing the day-to-day, every little detail of safety, we'd never get anywhere. The whole thing would stop working.
Right.
um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because you'd just be in
right, and you
firefighting mode
can't
all the
be
time.
you
You can't build anything
right.
to last.
So the culture
Yeah.
is the most important. You can have everything else in the book. You can have all the posters and the training and the PPE and the everything else and the most advanced safety knowledge. And if there's no culture, it's all for naught. And so having that really well-defined culture is what's truly the most important thing I've learned. But the most important part of being a good risk manager is, and a safety manager, is being able to be that culture champion. And then along with that, my third
Your
thing
third thing?
is the importance of embracing the new. And by new, I typically mean technology and approaches. There's a lot of, and I've talked with other safety pros in my industry and in others, there is a lot of, well, we've always done it this way and it's always kept us safe, so we need to continue. And to some degree, that's probably a good idea. We've always
Some
worn
of it
hard
is
hats on
and
this
some
job
of it
site, and
isn't.
we've always kept our people safe. You know what? You're right. Let's continue wearing hard hats on this job site.
Right.
But then there's things like technology, and how can technology be our friend and be our supporter? We use a couple of technologies, collision mitigation, forward radars on the trucks. My safety director likes to say, if you jump into one of the new Freightliners, it is the exact same suite of safety tech that you get on an S-Class Mercedes, because it's made by the exact same person, Daimler. Daimler is the parent of both companies and makes the same tech. And, so there's some really cool advances in truck safety tech. And that also includes the deployment of forward-facing, not driver-facing, but forward-facing cameras, and the way that the camera and the radar can make a safe driver better, because every one of us gets what we call transiently inattentive. You're going down the road and, oh, that's a nice cloud. And it happens to the best of us. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's how the human mind works. But having this technology that can say, oh, we're coming up on that car a little too quickly, and I'm going to slow your speed down to increase your following distance, or you're in cruise control and I'm going to make sure you don't get any closer than however many seconds from the vehicle in front of you. It makes drivers better, and it helps us keep these behemoths that we call tractor trailers upright in their lane and going from point to point, not getting involved in collisions or incidents. Go ahead.
Yeah. What's your favorite piece of technology that you think specific to our practice? Maybe that you or your safety managers use?
My favorite one right now is, as far as on the truck, is the Safety Direct and other associated camera systems that look forward, because nothing helps a driver understand what you're talking about more than being able to show them a video of the incident or the event. And then in addition to that, nothing protects your driver better when he's doing everything right than having that video and being able to turn over to our claims and the legal teams and say, hey, here's the video of what happened. The other party is accusing us of X, Y, or Z, and the video very clearly shows that we didn't do X, Y, or Z. In fact, we did everything the right way, and they're the at-fault party. And being able to show drivers that, hey, if we didn't have this video, it's word on word, and 90% of the time, guess who's losing? Because of, the cultural perception these days of all the, ambulance chasing lawyers that get on television and say, have you been hurt in a truck wreck? And it creates this false perception about the trucking industry and being dangerous, when really the majority, and the statistics back it up, the majority of the collisions are caused by, your personal vehicle mode operator not operating safely around us. And having that video to be able to back a driver up and to be able to get a driver off the hook and say, hey, no, you did everything right, and we've got your back, and here's the video proof. It's a really cool piece of technology, and it's moving forward. And I can talk about this because we've publicly already stated our partnership. The next step is actually replacing the mirrors with cameras. And we've publicly supported a company called Stone Ridge that is doing this. They call it Mirror Eye. The FMCSA just approved earlier this year, approved it for on-road testing. And so we've been testing it with mirrors still installed, and now we're going to get to start pulling the mirrors off the truck, opening up the driver's visual space around the truck, and giving him a near infallible view of the sides. I say near
Of the side, I was just going to say.
I say near infallible because I've actually been in the truck, and it has such a wide angle that we had the truck parked and we were sitting in it, and we had one of the people who was there had his daughter with him, and she was a 7 or 8 year old small kid, and she walked around the edge of the truck trying to hide from us. And outside of being directly behind the license plate, we could see her through the camera system in almost any point on the truck. And that sort of visibility, not only is it
Fabulous.
going to help the driver, but it's going to help the general public, because drivers are now going to be able to see the mistakes that car drivers make that normally we couldn't see, because it's this big bulky piece of equipment that it's really hard to see around. And it's gonna be the next wave forward, I think. Anyway, this is the world according to Andrew. I think it's going to be the next big wave forward in trucking safety is taking those mirrors off and replacing them with these systems.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, and I'm super excited about that. So, I mean, the big things, like I said, culture, got to have a good culture. You've got to have expertise. If you're a safety guy who thinks safety can be done from behind the desk or behind the clipboard, please do all of us a favor and go get hands-on, because you have to have that hands-on expertise, and then embrace the new. Don't fight the new, because new is never going to stop, and technology is going to keep changing, and it's going to keep making us better. And those of us that rely on it, are going to be better in the long run. I've complained for years that baseball is being ruined by analytics, but safety is not being ruined by analytics. It's that sort of stuff makes us better. And being with a company that has bought into that and believes it and wants to promote it is one of the best things about being in safety with my current role, is that I know it's not me against everyone. I know it's all of us together in the mission of keeping our drivers safe.
Beautiful, beautiful story. Andrew, thank you so much for sharing really an uplifting story about safety. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate it today. And, to love what you do and feel that it matters, what could be more fun? Right? That's a quote that I've stolen from Washington Post editor Katharine Graham, and I just love that one, and I think about that often with our work. So thank you for sharing your love of the practice, your excitement around it, and pretty exciting to hear about new technologies.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I've really enjoyed this.
Yeah, thanks so much. And thank you all for joining today and listening. And thank you for the work that you all do to make sure that your workers make it home safe every day, including your temporary workers. You can listen to all of our episodes at vividlearningsystems.com or subscribe in the podcast player of your choosing. If you have a suggestion for a guest, including if it's you, please contact me at social@vividlearningsystems.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.